Anytime there's something about artificial intelligence in the news, I get excited because that means I get to reach out to Dr. Denton, a friend of ours, an NDSU professor in computer sciences, to explain it to me like I'm a child that can understand and digest how rapidly things are changing here. And Dr. Denton back in the KFGO studio. Welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Always greatly enjoy being here. It's definitely a time where a lot of changes are happening.
There is a lot of changes, and it's tough to keep up with it, and because there's so many different tentacles to it. There's good, there's bad. I'm so confused on it. Then there's things like this that happen, and I'm like, okay, this could spell trouble for careers in some of the line of work that I do. What I found over the weekend was there was an artificial intelligence podcast special that they mimicked, and they say it's an impression of George Carlin. Who those that have followed his career know that brilliant comedian passed away in 2008, and now there's this new special that has him and his voice and his likeness in it, and there's people that take concern with that. I'm curious, with you as a professor and that has done with artificial intelligence and ethics, your reaction just to the face value of what I just explained.
I think it is very concerning. I think that it is concerning on a number of levels. One, of course, the commercial aspects, and but maybe the ones about consent is a big one. So, I mean, he obviously couldn't give consent. And then how does it actually change the content? And I mean, of course, it's not completely new that we have artists be their work be changed. I mean, when we were our kids were young, we would read them the Curious George books, and probably a lot of parents know how those. There's the first set that was actually written by the authors that most people identify with, Margaret and A.J. Ray, and then when you have the next ones, you can actually do the comparison very directly, and what you find is that I don't know. We always found that the ones that were originally written by them were. There was sort of that unexpected element, and if you read the later ones, you don't find that. Now, this was not AI, so the comparison, and this is too new. I haven't been able to actually do the comparison with the AI content. To what extent is it as funny? I do expect that some of the same things are going to happen as with these children's books, where the humor, the really advanced humor, does take more, take something special. I don't know that the AI can reproduce this. And with my use of AI, I haven't really seen it do that. It comes up with something that seems sort of a perfect amalgam, but not really the out there thing.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the reviews are in, and they're not good as far as this example of George Carlin, who with comedy, a lot of that comes with timing and knowing how to deliver, which this and the process that they went about, and they haven't really disclosed who's behind the funding of this whole model. And of course, I think it was Dudsey is a comedian AI that they. Most of the program, this thing to watch and consume every George Carlin special, every appearance to try to get down the voice, the cadence, the timing of all that. And it still wasn't spot on. People could still tell it wasn't actually George Carlin, which is good. But I think over time, what we've learned in this short amount of time that you and I have gotten to know each other, how much this has advanced in that narrow window, that given time, this type of technology is going to learn to be better at, as they're saying, it's an impression. They're saying it would be no different than me doing an impression of pick a celebrity. But it still feels different because it's not an individual. It's an artificial intelligence computer program doing it. Are they different, or are they more alike than what my mind wants me to believe here?
No, I think that it is part of a person, that the spontaneity that's lost is of course part of a person. So I do think that there is a problem when it comes to question answering AI. It's very good, but I mean, with spontaneity, I haven't really seen anybody who said that the AI is the same. And I mean, if that is what really the characteristic of the person was to of a comedian is in the spontaneity and in the unpredictable things. I mean, jokes by definition are sort of something unexpected. So how do you reproduce something that's unexpected when the algorithms don't actually have that unexpected element in the way? I mean, the generative AI that's used for this does, to the best of my knowledge, not have sort of a switch to make something be unexpected.
That's it's interesting you get there, because one of the things when I was reading through this, that this Dudsy, that this program that they created, again, they're not disclosing. I haven't been able to figure out who's actually funding and who's behind Dudsy, which is the name of this comedian artificial intelligence. But they're trying to get it to where they can prove artificial intelligence can be creative, that they can be creative, maybe, and we can take the comedic role out of it. They can be creative in obviously storytelling, in producing content. And I can say from experience, because I got an email solicitation, I think 3 weeks ago. I have no idea, someplace out of the UK. As you know, they'll send out to any small business out there. But I got an email that was talking about artificial intelligence and what that can be doing for news broadcasts, what it can be doing for news radio. That's pretty striking, thinking that, okay, they're trying to get creative into the sense that they'll be able to tell you local news and not have an actual news anchor be there.
That part seems less surprising to me. So I have done the test in my class where I let students pose questions, answer their own question, pose the same question to ChatGPT, and then question together with the two answers, given all of those to the whole class. So every student in the class would get a 15 or so question quiz. And it was shocking that people couldn't tell whether the AI had answered it or whether the student themselves had answered it.
I was going to get to that as far as are we going to be able to tell? We can tell that this is not George Carlin because it's a comedian, and if you followed along, like I said, you can tell that this is not him doing it. I think over time that's going to be more difficult to tell. And you're saying when it comes to the written form, it already is.
Yes, I think so. And I mean, the spoken form, I mean, even deep fakes earlier. Yeah. I mean, I just played some. I mean, there are deep fakes out there. There's this one deep fake that I like to play to my class where Mark Zuckerberg supposedly talks about how he's really just out there to get you, basically. And I mean, yeah, you can still recognize it, of course, but I mean, we're not that far away from that. But I mean, again, of course, art. You can make something that's like art. I mean, there have been works of art that have won prizes. So, I mean, the creativity that has been shown. There have been judges who have deemed Midjourney to be products of AI to be really creative. Okay. So, I mean, what is creative is of course the big question. I mean, the question I think rather is it creative at a level where the person who created the original material wouldn't feel embarrassed by it? And I mean, that's sort of where it's so when you look at the Creative Commons rules for how somebody can publish something that is not given a copyright but is open sourced, they can still say, I allow you to use my work, but I do not allow adaptations, because there are people who are aware that the adaptations can backfire more. And I mean, I think with humor, it may be very difficult, and you may still recognize it, but as long as you know it's not the person. I mean, as long as you know it's not the person, that's always a big factor. I mean, with some things like, I mean, there have been cases where people's records have been deliberately modified. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, I think, is one of the where it's known that his record was almost reverted almost in meaning. So there have been examples in history where people have manipulated somebody's record, and that's why some artists just choose to say, well, you can do whatever you can publish, you can use my work in another context, but you cannot change it.
So there's two paths here then that I'm saying, okay, consent of the original, because right now what's unique here is George Carlin's been gone to us for a number of years. The family's not happy with it. I don't know if they've taken it to court yet or if they're thinking of a lawsuit, which I don't know if they'd have any ground to stand on based on it being AI created and manipulating, like you say, his likeness without consent from his estate is one thing, but the other is the disclaimer of it. So if you're not given consent, is it, because I'm trying to think of that future, right? Because we've already heard campaigns, for example, say they're using artificial intelligence to have my likeness in a campaign ad. So if you're not going to consent to that most times, especially if it's a negative ad against you, so is it required that there's disclaimers that this comedic interpretation or impression, as they're saying to George Carlin, there's a disclaimer up front saying this was created by artificial? Does that give everybody a clear then and saying, hey, this was manipulated, it was done through an artificial, that you're okay to go do this?
I'm not even going to try and speak to the legal side of it.
Okay.
And part of it is that the legal side often just changes already. So I mean, remember when Google Books came out? I mean, it seemed like, so they are publishing copyrighted books. How is that possible? Well, it took the lawsuit 10 years, and after that, they couldn't undo it. So now it is legal. Does that answer that it was legal 10 years earlier? Would it have been legal if they could have pulled through the lawsuit fast enough to actually stop it? So there is this thing called Collingridge dilemma, that with any technology, when you first hear about it, you don't know where it's going. So you can't really oppose it. By the time that you could have opposed it, it's so part of the society that you can't undo it. So no matter how you look at it, you can't do anything. And I mean, in that regard, the next question, of course, is even if you decided that it isn't a good use of technology, what are you going to do? Because I mean, we've seen what happened with OpenAI, that when Helen Toner, who was on the board, and she said, well, we have to really evaluate how the consequences are going to be used. Sam Altman opposed that for a year and tried to so hard to get her off the board that the board got really frustrated, removed him from the CEO position. Well, I mean, but he was the one who won in the long run because the employees stood behind him, and not just that. And that might not even have done it. What really did it was the fact that Microsoft was willing to hire him and pretty much everybody else. So, I mean, it's not just a question of what is legal, what do we want, should we investigate the ethical consequences, but it's also, even if you wanted to, how are you going to do it?
What would be the final question I have for you before I let you get back to it here? What would you do? You're a professor in this world of ethics when it comes to this type of technology. What's the first thing you'd say? We have to be prepared for this, and here's what we would do. I go to the disclaimer, for example, and that's me just as an average Joe that doesn't live in this world, saying, okay, if you're going to use artificial intelligence to do a likeness, an impression, whatever it is, it's got to be up front that it's not actually that person's voice or their likeness. Is that enough?
No, the consent of the person. I mean, if it's a comedian, I think you could make the argument maybe that it's part of comedy that you have people laugh about you. But I mean, philosophers would surely not let you. It would amount to satirizing philosophy.
Yeah,
they would presumably not agree with that, with the knowledge that really just a slight rearranging of words can reverse the meaning completely. Yeah. So I think that consent is almost the bigger thing.
Okay.
And I mean, do you want to make the argument that if you're in comedy, you consent to that? I don't think comedians really would. Actually, ironically, still in the history of that I've taught social implications of AI, the one time that my students were adamant we should discuss something, it was when Midjourney first came out, and the artists were upset that the copyright was stolen.
There's just so much that keeps coming down the pipe on this that I'm going to have you back in another time. The next time there's a controversy out there about somebody's likeness being used and where we go from here. It's an election year. I think we're going to be talking a lot about this, unfortunately. Dr. Ann Denton, anything before I let you go?
No, I think that really captured the points.
Well, thanks for coming on over. Just come on back next time, all right? Dr. Ann Denton, our guest, NDSU Professor in Computer Sciences. Your thoughts at 35270. I'm way behind my time. I'll get you caught up on some of these messages. Then I'll wrap up the second hour next.